Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Rose to the Ceilings podcast. Today, we're joined by Allison from Literacy ELL. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Allison Zhang and I'm the founder of Literacy for ELL, which stands for English Language Learners. I'm currently a junior at Polytechnic High School, which is based in Los Angeles, California. Yeah.
We're all West Coast girlies here. That's so fun.
Yay!
Can you tell us a little bit about literacy for ELL? Like, what do you guys do?
Yeah. So, Literacy for ELL is a nonprofit organization that I started around half a year ago, perhaps more now. But the idea really started in ninth grade.
Mm.
And so, how it started was I began volunteering at Reading Partners. And Reading Partners is a national nonprofit organization that works to give reading skills and writing skills to underserved children. And so I was volunteering weekly, and they gave me an idea last year during my sophomore year about running book drives because of how they were lacking books for volunteers to read to the students. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. So I was like, okay, I'm going to begin thinking about book drives. And so that's really where I first started. But then it branched off because I also started thinking about what about I began teaching English, right? So I'm teaching English current and Reading Partners, but what if I like expanded it to other countries? And I thought that would be the most useful because in other countries, that is honestly where, like, sometimes English education is at the lowest.
Mm.
And the reason why I began to think of it as more important is also because I began doing research about English language learners. And you can see this in Literacy for ELL's kind of news section. And I did a lot of research and it really culminated down to like a few points, which is that English is really important, kind of worldwide right now, if one wants to be like very competitive in the job market. And second, there's not a lot of English education available, both nationally in the United States as well as in other countries. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it started.
That
Yeah.
is absolutely wonderful. I love it. And the story of your
Yeah.
expansion, too. That's great that you're going beyond from your experiences. I love that so much. And I'm wondering, from all of your research and your experience tutoring, what do you feel are the biggest barriers that you've seen kids and young people face when they're learning a new language?
Yeah. So I have two responses to this. First, it's a little bit techy, which is like phonics. And phonics is basically how one pronounces words. And the problem with phonics is that it is so difficult to learn, especially if a student already has a prior native language. And this is because English has a lot of pronunciations, a lot of words, and, like, for example, vowels that other languages don't have or are pronounced completely differently. And thus, having to make that like mind switch from their native language to English can be extremely difficult, especially when they have to talk fast and they can't think it out for a long duration of time. And the second one, I think this one is more broad, but it's so prevalent, is a lack of support and thus a lack of kind of self confidence. And we really see this in, for example, like students not having their parents being there. And I think this is especially prominent for English language learners because their parents, most times, are immigrants. And if they're immigrants, it's very difficult for them to communicate with teachers. And because of that disruption, in that communication, students cannot voice their kind of concerns to their parents and then their parents talk to the teachers. No, the students have to go directly to the teachers. And that can be extremely daunting because of the first of all, it's a student teacher interaction. The students may be young, they may be afraid to speak up. And second, if students are struggling in the language, then having to use that language they're struggling in to talk to a teacher is just kind of compounding and makes it almost impossible to reach out. Yeah, that those are the two main struggles. Yeah.
So just a lot of like issues with self advocacy, I guess, is kind of like what you're saying. I think that's
Yeah.
such an important point because I kind of want to ask a little bit about this when you brought it up earlier. I'm not sure how it works in the States as opposed to like Canada where we're from, but like how do you see ELL being supported in schools? Like, are there specific programs to help kids with this, or are they just kind of like left on their own? Like, what issue are you kind of seeing in schools with this?
Yes. So there are specific programs for English language learners. One is ESL. And basically, ESL is a direct transition. Basically, it's they put you in a program, you learn as much English as possible, and once you take a test and you're deemed fluent enough in English, then you're completely transitioned out of the program and into the quote unquote regular program for native speakers. And the second program, the one that I advocate more for, is the bilingual program. And the bilingual program focuses on students retaining their native language while at the same time learning English. And we have seen actually through studies of this implementation actually a lot of benefits because students have something to fall back on and they are also learning at the same time. Thus, they're keeping both languages, which can be really useful in the future. However, addressing your kind of question more directly, there has been a very severe lack of bilingual implementation. And one of these reasons is that people simply don't believe in bilingual education. A lot of people simply believe in directly transitioning to English and kind of completely kind of putting away native languages, simply saying that should be for the household only, not in school. And then second reason is teachers. It is kind of difficult to hire teachers that are multilingual. And I think I did an article about this earlier, but the one way I think we combat this is that there are actually a lot of lower school educators, like for example, day school educators, and who are multilingual. And they have been trained in education. However, there are actually systemic hindrances to these multilingual teachers becoming teachers of, for example, elementary school. And so if it's mostly in part because of legislation and how many hours they have to attain to become a teacher, which studies have shown is actually like not really necessary, but it's just legislation. And if you want to read more about this, this is in like Literacy for Alice news section. Um, but yeah, that is one of the main hindrances to bilingual education. Yeah, and there's been a lot of studies about bilingual education. People simply don't believe it. Like, there's a lot of people I've heard that just like bilingual education. What is that? That doesn't work. There's been a lot of studies that show it does work. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I never knew like the two very distinct programs going on there. So I'm glad I have your take on that. But I'm also kind of wondering with literacy for ELL, like what like kind of age range are you targeting with this? Like we've kind of talked about high schoolers, like kids in elementary school. It's like where do you think your organization kind of like tries to target, or is it more like a broad range?
Yeah, my organization mainly targets elementary schoolers. And the primary reason why is because elementary schoolers, that is when, before fifth grade, that is when they are the most susceptible to kind of their environment. And thus, if they are able to learn English then, they can really have significant improvements for the rest of their life. And also because during my 3 years of working with reading partners, I always worked with elementary schoolers, and thus I was also just more comfortable working with elementary schoolers. But literacy for ELL does do more than that. For example, working with the Sri Lanka women refugees, those are they're over 18 yet. So they're definitely not, elementary schoolers. We don't only do that, but that is our primary focus. And for example, like the books we collect, I usually limit those only to elementary schoolers. Yeah.
Oh, I love that you're doing that. You're expanding from just where you would think tutoring belongs in schools. It belongs in so many other places because of the access to education in other countries and for different genders too. We're a feminist podcast. Got it.
Yes,
I
definitely.
absolutely love that. I love that.
Could you expand a little bit on how you talked about you're like working with Syrian like women refugees? Like that's super interesting to me. Just I'm sure it's interesting to a lot of people too. So could you talk a little bit more about like the work you're doing there?
Yes. So I got into contact with Sisters at Law. And Sisters at Law is a nonprofit organization in Colombo, Sri Lanka. And it is a relatively small nonprofit organization run by two women, Marini and Yashinka. Marini is kind of the head in charge of this nonprofit organization, and she usually does like law cases for free for her clients, because of how, and she usually works with women who have been abused, and she recently took in women refugees, and these are women who have been abused, whether physically, sexually. They've had a traumatic past as children, and she's taken them in, and they live all in a building together, and so that makes it also very convenient for the classes because they can all be together and kind of learn together. There are 5, and basically what I'm working with them is teaching them interview skills. And why I'm doing this is because they're already, adults, and thus they're ready for the job market, basically. And thus I'm teaching them, if they want to get a job that requires them to know English, how they would perform the interview. And they know some English, but not that much. And I'm specifically teaching them interview because that also opens up a lot of job opportunities for them. If they can show that they can speak English during the interview, that like rate of getting a job increases by so much more. And so yeah, I'm going down like a kind of a rubric. And they have like these tests, these exams. We have not had one yet, but after a few more classes, we're gonna have an exam, and then afterwards we move on to more. And then by the end of it, they'll be ready for kind of going into the job market. Yeah.
Gosh. And did you create the curriculum yourself?
Yes, I did. It has like quite a lot of information in it. And definitely creating the lesson plans. I did not take into consideration how long I made the curriculum based on how, but it's great because I get to work with them a lot, and I also have other volunteers working with them. One thing I was really excited about was that yesterday I got an email from someone in Sri Lanka who wants to volunteer with this Sisters at Law, and I was very excited about that, and I'm looking forward to the work with her I can do with her in Sri Lanka as well.
That's so sweet. I love that. Oh, that's such a happy thing. I'm just so yeah. That's so nice that you're doing that. With this like curriculum that you've made, help these women be able to learn these interview skills and make them like able to financially support themselves in the future. Are you like posting these anywhere? Because I feel like this would be such a great thing to make like accessible to a lot of people? Like, is there somewhere you're putting these, or is this just like something you have in these classes?
Oh, the curriculum. Sorry, you cut out a little bit there. What did you say? Like the curriculum?
Yeah, like the curriculum and lessons you put together.
Oh yeah, honestly, that is a great idea. I have not done that. I do post about like the classes we've had, like some of them. If they're special, I'll post about them. I have not posted the curriculums and the slides. I think that would actually be an amazing idea. Like also like offering up like the curriculum if anyone wants to just go on and learn. That's a great idea actually.
Let's see, we're all expanding every day. This is what happens on the Roast in the Ceilings podcast.
Yeah.
Really
And I
good.
guess to wrap us up today, I absolutely love hearing the amount of initiative that you've taken and the amount of passion that you have. So, for the young girls watching who might want to reach that point that you're at and might want to expand on their passion, what advice would you give them to do that?
Yeah, I would say like first just like go into it. Like I was so scared to start an Insta because I was like, oh my goodness, what are people gonna think? Like this is going to be so bad, especially if people in my school see this. They're gonna be like, oh my goodness, what is she doing? Just do it. Like people will either don't care or they're going to love it. Like no one's going to hate on you for it. They're just going to either ignore it or love it, and they're most likely going to love it. So don't be afraid. First, just dip your toes into it. And then, second, this is like more down to the nitty gritty, but get yourself partnered up with an organization. Talk to an organization. I talked to reading partners for so long, and they gave me so many helpful tips because a organization has already been established for a while. They know what they're doing. They already have connections. You can even use some of their connections, and also they have such good advice. So yeah, those are my two pieces of advice. Just first, do it. Like, don't be afraid. Do it. Yes.
I mean, there's a reason Nike says it all the time, right?
Gonna get copyrighted.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Allison. This has been great.
Those
Thank
tips
you
were
so
super
much for
helpful as
having
well.
me.
Very practical. Of course. Hope you had fun. I definitely did. I learned a lot. So again, thank you so much for sharing. All
Thank you
Thank
for
right.
you.
listening.
Bye.